Myra, thank you for joining me again. The intro music, if I heard it correctly, there's 4 questions to ask to get your end user's attention on MICR or microtoner. If you missed our first web episode with regards to in this series with regards to this subject, you'll get a clear picture of the correct pronunciation of that MICR. But this episode, we want to talk specifically about the questions to ask your customers to get their attention about check printing and safely printing checks.
Absolutely.
So you provided me, thank you, Myra Flynn from Source Technologies. Thank you again for joining us for another episode on the Source. And you provided me the questions, so I'm going to ask you the questions, and I'm looking forward to getting your answers.
All
so
right.
Question number one on the screen here. Simply start by asking, how are you printing checks today?
Yes. This is where our reseller partners can open the door. When you ask this question, you're looking for one of 3 responses. They're probably not going to respond in this way, so you might have to do some digging. But the 3 things you're really looking for is they're using pre-printed check stock. And when MICR people are talking about pre-printed check stock, the only thing we're referring to is the MICR line. That funky font at the bottom of the check that has the account routing number and the check number. If that line is pre-printed when the check stock is received from the check vendor, it is a huge security risk. It is very, very vulnerable because all we need is access to that check stock and we can start writing checks. I spoke to a reseller last year who was printing his company checks this way and was absolutely shocked on how easy it was to chemically remove the payee and dollar amount. One of his sales reps' expense checks was intercepted and chemically altered. And as soon as he found out that this had happened, he went to one of our distribution partners, brought in our 9917 micro printer, secure micro printer. And then he went to Amazon and bought him some common household chemicals like bleach, acetone, nail polish remover. And he did some A/B testing, and he was absolutely amazed on how easy it was to remove the payee and dollar amount. And then when he tried it with ours, muddy mess. You could see that there was no way, there was not enough chemical to remove the toner from one of our checks to chemically alter it. OEM printers offer great adhesion rates. But those adhesion rates are for regular print jobs. They are not optimized to prevent chemical alteration.
Yes, go ahead.
The second way that you're going to see, and honestly, this is going to be the most common. I feel like this is our biggest competitor in the industry, and that is taking an OEM printer and putting a micro cartridge in it. And this setup is just rifled with issues. And the biggest issue is many customers have been printing this way for years with no concerns. But think about what has changed with our passwords over the last decade, right? And multi-factor authentication. What used to work no longer works, right? And when you're using an OEM printer with a micro cartridge in it, my next question to them is, who's supporting that? Because the OEM manufacturer did not manufacture that printer for check printing. And when something does arise, there's nobody to call.
Yeah. You run into that problem, and I guess a lot of people don't know that. I think we run into that a lot. Is that you can't just put a MICR cartridge. There's MICR supplies. You can't just throw that into your regular OEM. That there are these dedicated devices that Source Technology produces, and you work directly with OEM manufacturers to have their branded models that you can modify to make them specifically work with these cartridges. That's a real important point.
Absolutely. And then the third way that you're going to see them is by or the third response that you may get from them is we're using an OEM authorized secure micro printer. There are only 3 of us out there. So there's a high probability that if they're not using a source technology solution, we're going to be able to lower their cost or increase their security and functionality. There is true competitive advantage of placing source technologies, secure micro solutions in your customers, and I'm happy to have those conversations.
And so are we, as a distributor with the resellers. But you're available to help our resellers with the customers. So that's a great resource as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that's question number 1, the top questions you can ask. I'm going to hit number 2. Are you ready for that?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's go.
The second question you should ask is, are you confident your checks are secure and compliant with banking standards?
Yes, that's a great question too. So here, what we're looking for is to make sure that their micro line is being printed with micro toner. Again, it is required by the Federal Reserve, and that they're printing their checks on check stock that offers security features. So check stock security varies widely. I've seen customers attempting to print checks on plain copy paper. And so what we're just trying to find out if they are compliant with the Federal Reserve and what the banking requirements are, so that we can increase their security and make sure that they're not going to receive bank fines or rejected checks. When a bank rejects your checks, it's more than just the bank fines. You have to think about your brand, right? And if I'm paying Brent and Brent tries to deposit my check and the bank is like, yeah, this is no good, is Brent really going to trust me as a company moving forward? It's, so we want to make sure that they're covered all the way around. Check security is a layered approach. We want to make sure they're using the right check stock. We want to make sure they're using a supported micro printer, a supported micro toner. We also want to make sure that they're using positive pay file, which is a file that they send to their bank, and the bank reconciles as checks are being presented for deposit. Not one of those is foolproof. The positive pay, the check stock, the micro solution, is none of it's completely 100% fallible. So you have to layer it up. You've got to make sure that every step in the process is compliant and secure.
And some of these models that you have in the micro printer, if I remember correctly, some of the models have locking trays to protect that check stock too, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The check stock is not cheap. None of it is cheap, but we have to remember, we're not printing a football schedule. We're printing money, and so yes, a lot of companies, even if your customer is using that pre-printed check stock that we mentioned, and they're not interested in going into an on-demand micro solution, we've at the very least have got to get them to put some kind of security protocols around chain of custody protocols around that check stock. And that's going to be keeping that paper under lock and key at all times. For sure.
And I like the part you talk about protecting brand, because I think everybody can relate to that as well. You mentioned that a little while ago.
Yes.
I mentioned to you offline just issues that we had internally with folks getting phished, and clicking on phishing scam, and then we're customers getting emails from us that are additional phishing scams. So I mean, it's just a bad look when that's happening. It's cringeworthy, if you will, for all of us when that happens.
Cringeworthy. We're getting hit with security in every aspect, or security risks in every aspect of our lives. And our partners, the resellers, are already, most of them are leading with a security message. So adding secure micro check printing to that talk track, and it's a natural fit. You're already talking about printers, you're already talking about security. Don't forget the most overlooked printer in the fleet, and that would be the microcheck printer.
Agree. Everybody from my teenager to my senior citizen mothers dealing with fraudulent scams all the time. So it's very relatable, which is a good topic. In general, people can see the value in it. So question number 3, and I'll ask that, and I'll let you give the answer to it. The questions that we should be asking: do you know what the cost of a check fraud could be to your business if it happened tomorrow? Great question.
Great question, because this gets them really thinking. And I've asked this, at conferences in front of end users. The statistics around this are staggering. According to the AUFP, which is the Association for Financial Professionals, more than half of businesses that are victims of check fraud recoup less than 50% of their total loss, and 30% recoup zero. It varies state by state, but a company only has 30 to 60 days to report fraud to their bank. If you miss that window, the bank's not even going to investigate it. And this happened to a partner of ours last year. They were not aware that one of their checks were chemically altered. The fraudster only changed the payee, which was the vendor's name, and her positive pay file at the bank did not catch it, and it was not brought to her attention until the vendor reached out, and because she had passed her net 30 days, and her bank wouldn't even investigate it. I've spoken with companies with very little concern because they think, oh, we have little risk because we're only printing a few checks. And somebody said that to me just a couple of months ago when I was at a tech fair. And my response to them was, it only takes one instance. And that instance could be very costly. And we set up a conference call to discuss further how we could, increase the security with how they were printing checks now to secure those few checks that they are printing.
Yeah. And we're seeing that, we mentioned in the previous episode, I'll share the link in this one as well, where, the U.S. Treasurer announced last year that AI had recovered $375 million in fraudulent checks that were fraud that was recovered and found. Yep. So the cost is weighty. And that's on a global scheme or a national scheme. But yeah, for the business, it certainly can make or break the operation. Not to mention, as we mentioned earlier, the brand recognition and the damage it does to that.
Yes, absolutely.
So the fourth and final question in this episode of questions that resellers could be asking their end users is: if they are using an OEM printer with a MICR cartridge, ask them who they call when there's an issue.
Absolutely. So like I mentioned, this is going to be the setup that you're going to encounter most often, is an OEM printer with a MICR cartridge. And, I think I mentioned OEM printer manufacturers do not support microtoner in their printers. I see is reseller partners can service the device from a hardware perspective, replacing those physical components. But if something goes wrong on the firmware MICR side, those customers are left without support. I've seen companies that had very, very large fleet. I'm talking a few hundred OEM printers that were printing with microtoner. They have been doing it for years this way. And then one day they walked in, there was an accounting software update. It misaligned that MICR line. There was no way to fix it. The OEM printer manufacturer told them, we don't support MICR in our printers, and said, call our MICR partner. And the MICR partner is like, yeah, that's not our printer. We can't support that device. And this particular customer was left with an entire fleet. And like I said, we're talking, I can't remember, it was 150, 200 printers across the US that were printing checks that could no longer print checks. It's a critical business function. You know, companies need to have fully supported and secure solutions in place to protect their businesses. So, you know, when you come across these customers, that's great. Who are you going to call if something goes wrong?
We hope they'll call
The
our
source.
customers, the source, Arlington, Source Tech. There's a source theme we have here between
have a source theme.
our brands here. Myra Flynn from Source Tech Technologies, Brent Martin from Arlington, your best source in distribution and MICR toner. This is a series that we're going to continue. There's more print security topics that are going to be covered in this. But Myra, I want to thank you for your time again. I've put links in this this YouTube video in the description to some of these outside third-party stories and news stories. There's a couple news stories out there. We highlighted one of them in our previous episode that are active check fraud issues that have happened just within the last few months at the time of this recording. And we hope that you'll subscribe to this channel. We have additional videos. We said we have another episode. We have future episodes coming. And we want you to learn, have tools that can help you go out and fight the security issues and the fraud that's happening out there, and see the opportunities that you have as a reseller to help your end users, and your end users can wear a cape when they come into the office, having stopped any kind of illicit fraud from occurring in their business and being victims of this, right?
Absolutely, Brent. Always a pleasure hanging out with you, and I'm looking forward to our next couple of episodes.
Likewise. Thanks again, Myra. Thank you for watching.
Bye, Brent.